Good morning, everyone. I have just 15 minutes, so I'll try to be as fast as possible. First, I really want to appreciate Pastor Fisaya and his wife for this opportunity. Really great having me here. Um, and please, can we put our hands together for the speakers that have spoken before me? It's a tough job when you're not the first speaker, right? You have to not drop the ball. So I'll be speaking on building a solid foundation when transitioning into tech, right? And before I share some of my points, I transitioned into tech. My first degree was in environmental biology. Not very exciting. But then we're in Nigeria where you try to do something and then Nigeria happens and the university happens and they sort of do something about what you thought you wanted to do and then they offer you a different course, right? But that shouldn't be any restriction or limitation to whatever it is you want to do. So of course, I did well in school. And so in case you probably think it's completely useless if you want to transition into tech and then you probably have a background that is non-tech, it's not completely useless, right? What I did was to, of course, do well in school. But while I was in school, I started taking some courses and then eventually I was able to transition based on some of the things that I learned on my own. The good thing with tech is you can be self-taught. Many of the tech roles have a path where you can be self-taught, and eventually you can develop the necessary skills for those roles. Right? You have a lot of free courses online. I learned primarily through YouTube. Right? So you have YouTube, you have Udemy, you have some of these specialized platforms where you can learn tech skills. All right. So if you want to transition into tech, what are the things to pay attention to? The first is, why do you want to transition into tech? Why tech? Right? I know that a lot of people say there's blood money in tech. I haven't seen blood money yet, but maybe. Right? But your why has to be stronger than money. If not, you find yourself starting the journey and then finding out that tech is very competitive. And then you realize that there are different leagues in tech. You can play in the small league and find out that you have the designation, you have the role, but you're not necessarily making the money that you expected to make. All right, so your why has to be stronger than money. If not, you could be disappointed. There are many ways to make money, legitimate ways. All right, there are many legitimate ways to make money. So your reason for transitioning into tech should not be primarily to make money. Right, your why has to be stronger. And maybe I should add that your why has to be resilient as well, because the journey from being a newbie in tech to getting to a point where you're able to at least make a decent income will require that you keep going even when it doesn't make sense. Um, for example, when I was transitioning into tech, what I realized was that you're learning, you're applying, but you're not necessarily seeing the results early enough. It's like you're trying to learn it, but it's still not making sense. What makes it make sense is that you continue. And that phase of doing something continuously, even when you're not getting results immediately, could be very hard. So your why has to be resilient. I hope we got that. All right, so the second thing I want to point out is tech roles are divided into two categories, right? So there are technical roles, there are non-technical roles. All right, and then in the category of technical roles, you have code roles and no code roles, right? So you can, when I say technical now, I mean that you're actually doing something actively as a tech person, right? You're writing code, you're designing software, you're a product manager, you're a DevOps engineer, you're an SRE engineer. You're actually doing something technical, right? But then within technical roles, there are some roles that require writing actual code, which is what many people are afraid of, right? Writing code. Now we have ChatGPT, and maybe I'll say something about that soon. All right. So you could either be writing code or you're not writing code. So that means you can be a web flow developer. You can be a PM. A PM doesn't necessarily write any code, but then you're also in a technical role. I hope that makes sense. All right. But then you now have non-technical roles, right? So you can be a marketing person in a tech company. You're in tech, but you're not just in a technical role in tech. I hope that makes sense. All right. So there, like tech is primarily that you are offering services or your role has something to do with the development of a software or digital product, right? So you can be HR in tech and you're making tech money, but not necessarily as a technical person, all right? So as you're thinking about transitioning into tech, don't just think about technical roles, right? You don't have to just think about, I need to learn how to write code or I need to be a cybersecurity person. You can, there's several roles. There's HR, there's admin. I mean, every other thing that you have in a typical company, you most likely will find in a tech company. And that is a non-technical role that also is relevant in tech. Just in case you're looking for like a quick way, dare I say, to get into tech. All right. And then, like I said, there are no code roles, right? Things that don't necessarily require code. So you can be a PM. You can be a UX writer, for instance. You don't need to learn how to write any code. You can leverage your ability to write content and then transition into UX writing, which is a non-technical role in tech. All right, so there are many opportunities. You can be an account manager, you can be in finance, you can be in technical support, right? You can be a product marketer. So that means if you have background in marketing, you can easily transition into product marketing and find your way in tech. I hope that makes sense. The third thing, I think this is very important, and this is something that worked for me, is find a point of convergence, right? We're in a place where many times the journey is never really linear. You probably studied biology like me, and then your journey was just not straightforward. There's always a point of convergence, right? Where do all my experiences, all my skill sets, where do they converge? If I'm transitioning into tech, if I have experience writing content, if I have experience with marketing, if I have experience with running ads and doing social media marketing, where do all these skills converge, right? Because the truth about it is there are some people who went to school, especially if you're thinking of maybe a global role. There are people out there who went to school specifically for the role you're applying for. And you are meeting the role halfway after spending 5 years doing other things. You need to find a way to leverage what you already have, right? And then use that as a springboard to transition into a new role in tech. So if you already know how to write well, you can get into tech as a UX writer. That's a very good way to find convergence. For example, for me, I was doing graphic designs, motion designs, right? But then I was going to transition into product design. And I needed to leverage my understanding of motion to build skill sets in interaction design. I needed to leverage my understanding of visual communication to build my skill set in designing UIs. I needed to leverage my experience. Of course, I was a campus leader, so I spoke to a lot of people. I needed to leverage my experience speaking to people to build skills as a UX researcher, right? So all of those things were not a waste. By the way, if you're here and you studied a Greek or something, it's not a waste. Find somewhere in your journey where things can converge. I hope that makes sense. All right. Something I want to quickly mention, and I think this is like the most important part of my speech. We learn things very terribly in Nigeria. We don't know how to learn in Nigeria. And I'll give you an example. I learned how to play music. I think I still know how to play music. I hope I do. It's been a while. But if you learned how to play the keyboard here, and I know many people started, and for some reason they can still only play one song after 20 years. The reason is because we started out learning music to play a song, not to learn music. So there's this desire to want to quickly show off results without necessarily paying attention to rudiments. And it's the same thing with tech. You find out that in Nigeria, you can do a boot camp. And trust me, I really don't like boot camps because it creates an illusion that you can do something in 3 weeks and then start making 2 million naira. It's not going to happen because there are many things that are going to be skipped, all right? And so what happens is I see a lot of people on LinkedIn, they know how to put together some UI screens, and then the next thing, they are showing themselves off as a senior product designer. What will happen eventually is you get all the applauds, people are hailing you, hey, and LinkedIn people, they don't even read what you wrote. They just like and pass, But I've interviewed people, and the part where we drop off lots of candidates is that they obviously can do the show off part, but they've not built strength in the rudiments. So it takes time, all right? If you're transitioning into tech, it takes time. There are engineers who can write code, but there are engineers who are good engineers. And I know the difference. I used to work at a company where, I know if you're an engineer here, when they say somebody cooked beans, right? It means the code, it was working, but you know when you patch things so much that if you just remove one thing, the entire thing comes crashing down. The engineer could write code, but he wasn't a good engineer, and there's a difference. To be a good engineer, you need to understand how engineering works. You need to understand how problem solving works, how to build good code, readable code, right? And so that's the difference. If you just want to get a quick job, you can do a boot camp, get a quick job. But if you're thinking of something sustainable, pay attention to the rudiments. And the same thing with music, all right? You can learn how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb in 2 days, but you will never be able to play in an orchestra. Are you following what I'm saying? All right? So as far as people are concerned, you can play the keyboard because you can play a song. But we all know that when the chips are down, and let me say when the rubber meets the road, okay, you find out that you don't have the necessary skills. The other thing I want to say as I round up, two things. Learn broadly, right? And then begin to streamline. So there are three categories of developers, designers, or tech people, right? There are people who are called generalists. So these people are gbogbo niche, if you permit me to use that word, right? They can do several things. They've touched on different aspects of that work, all right? Then you have specialists, right? So people who have developed capabilities in a very specific area. And then I describe it as cone-shaped, right? Professionals. These are people who have developed broad capabilities, and they've also been able to streamline. So what it does is that no matter what the undulations are in the tech space, you always have your niche. And then you can always, swing back and forth between different aspects of your role. Do you understand what I'm saying? For example, we were trying to hire, and so we were interviewing someone. Now, this guy had worked in a very big bank in South Africa. He obviously works in a very large team, and so he's a specialized person in his team. But the problem with that is that he doesn't know how to then combine other aspects of his role. He can only do one thing very well. And right now, we don't need somebody that can do just one thing very well. We need somebody that can manage different things as in the best way possible, right? Finally, I would say get a mentor. Get somebody who is in the same role, who you can ask questions, who you can follow in that sense, right? And the reason is, many times the journey, your learning curve is going to be a lot shorter if you have somebody who can show you the ropes. Okay, I didn't really have mentorship, so I made a lot of mistakes along the way. Learned things I didn't need to learn because I didn't know what was relevant and what was not. So I would say get a mentor. I offer free mentorship on ADP list. So if you can find me on ADP list, you can just book a session with me. I offer free mentorship. I can answer specific questions that you ask, and I think it will be helpful. Thank you very much.